After the night, Sierra talked about Lucas's proposal for 20 minutes straight, then casually hinted that she expected something on that level from me. I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I wasn't just competing with her ex. I was competing with a glorified, polished memory she had curated in her head. And memories don't lose. Memories don't mess up. Memories don't disappoint. So I started pulling back. Not dramatically, not in a way meant to punish her. I just stopped overextending. I texted less. I didn't initiate every plan. I didn't fill every silence. A healthy partner would have noticed something shifting. But Sierra didn't see distance, she saw growth. She even laughed one night and said, "You've been really calm lately." It reminds me of how centered Lucas was. That sentence alone confirmed everything. My withdrawal wasn't a warning sign to her, it was a comfort. A familiar pattern. A reflection of someone else. That's when I decided, if Sierra wanted Lucas's perfect breakup, the one she praised so openly, then that's exactly what she would get. Not out of spite, not out of pettiness, but because she had spent months shaping me into a ghost, into a placeholder, into a reenactment of a man I never agreed to imitate. I made a reservation at the restaurant Sierra had described with such reverence, the one Lucas had chosen for their beautiful, mature breakup. The one she said marked the moment he outgrew the relationship. I didn't choose it to be cruel. I chose it to hold up a mirror she had refused to look into. When I invited Sierra to dinner, she dressed up more than usual. She greeted me with that hopeful smile people get when they're expecting good news. As soon as we sat down, she began reminiscing about the lighting, the food, the decor, even the exact table Lucas had picked for their 3-month anniversary. She wasn't fully here with me. She was talking from inside a memory. I listened quietly. Halfway through the meal, I put my glass down and met her eyes. "Sierra," I said, "these past months, I've learned a lot from the stories you've told me." She beamed. Actually beamed. "I knew you were growing. I can feel it." I nodded once. "I know exactly what I need to do now." She leaned forward, expecting some heartfelt promise. Instead, I spoke the line she had once recited with admiration. "I think I've outgrown this relationship, and I need to move forward." Her entire face went pale. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" Her voice cracked. "This isn't funny." I stayed gentle, calm, exactly how she had described Lucas. "I'm ending the relationship in the way you've always called perfect, calm, mature, respectful." Her breathing turned shaky. No, that's not Ethan. Stop. You're not him." And I said the truth I had avoided for too long. "But that's the problem. You never let me be me. You've been trying to turn me into him from day one." Her eyes filled instantly. Tears streaked down her cheeks, mixing with mascara. "You can't do this to me." I looked at her, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the clarity I should have had earlier. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm letting go of something you were never fully in. You weren't with me, Sierra. You were with the version of Lucas you wish you still had." She stood abruptly, her chair screeching so loudly the entire restaurant turned to look. Without another word, she rushed out, shaken, confused, collapsing under the weight of the very standard she had worshipped. But that wasn't the last time I saw her. Not even close. 3 days later, she showed up at my door, eyes swollen, voice trembling. "Lucas never disappeared after the breakup. He talked things through. You owe me that." I stayed behind the door. "We already talked." That night was the conversation. She left in tears. But the attempts didn't stop. 2 days later, she texted saying she'd accidentally found my antique watch in her apartment, a watch I was absolutely certain I had left at home. She insisted I come get it so we could talk properly. I replied, "If that watch isn't in my mailbox by tomorrow morning, I'll report it stolen." The next morning, it was there. A week later, she showed up at a group dinner with a literal PowerPoint presentation titled 8-Week Reconnection Plan, Proven Effective by Lucas. Everyone froze. Every friend stared, and I pressed play on a voice recording I had saved, Sierra describing Lucas's beautiful breakup in detail, praising the exact script I had repeated. Then I asked her one simple question. "When he did it, you called it maturity. When I did it, you called it cruelty. Why is that?" Sierra fell apart at the table. But even then, it wasn't over. She staged coincidental run-ins at coffee shops, restaurants, trails, sometimes even wearing the outfit from our first date, as if she could rewind the story. The final attempt happened at the gym. She approached me with a folder labeled Couples Therapy Exercise Plan, Lucas Method. That was it. I looked straight at her and said, loud enough for there to be no misunderstanding, "You are harassing me. If you don't stop, I will file for a restraining order." This time, she froze. No tears, no begging, just silence, heavy and hollow. She turned and walked away. And that was the last time she ever approached me, after Sierra walked out of the gym with that pale, stunned expression. I was almost certain it would be the last time she dragged me back into her cycle, but I had underestimated the strength of habit, fear of abandonment, and the emotional dependency she'd never once admitted. For days afterward, I lived in a strange mix of expectation and caution. Expectation that she might show up again, and caution that if she did, I needed to be clear-headed enough not to get pulled back into the endless fixing plans she kept designing based on Lucas. But unlike every previous attempt, this time Sierra went silent. No long paragraphs, no late-night calls, no sudden appearances outside my apartment. I didn't know if it was because my warning genuinely scared her, or because she finally recognized the mess we had both been dragged into. That silence, at first, was unsettling. It felt like entering a room that used to be unbearably loud, but when it suddenly goes quiet, you don't know what to do with the emptiness. I spent a few days relearning how to live without glancing over my shoulder every time I walked into a cafe, without bracing myself at the gym in case she appeared with another solution inspired by Lucas. And as the silence stretched on, something I hadn't felt in a long time started to return: air. It was light, clear, and it didn't carry the weight of anyone else's memories. One quiet Sunday afternoon, while making coffee, I realized I had gone almost a full week without thinking about Sierra in that heavy, anxious way. I didn't check my phone expecting a message from her. I didn't wonder whether I was being followed or monitored. I just lived, and that feeling was both strange and deeply freeing. My friends noticed too. Mason said, "Man, you're finally breathing again." Lily sighed in relief. Seriously, if this went on any longer, I was going to intervene. And Jamie simply patted my shoulder and said, "Welcome back to yourself." But healing wasn't just about being free from Sierra. It was about facing myself, the version of me I had allowed to be worn down over time. I started noticing how much I had changed while trying to meet standards that never belonged to me. The meals I cooked tasted like mine again. The way I dressed, the way I watched movies, the way I talked and walked, none of it was being molded into the shadow of Lucas anymore. I went back to the things I had neglected: books, running, sitting alone in cafes with no purpose. Small things, but they made me feel like pieces of myself were being returned one by one. Then one day, Jamie texted me, "Sierra started therapy." I didn't know how she knew, but I believed it. And when she added the next sentence, something inside me quietly settled. She cried, saying, "I didn't love Ethan. I loved the version I thought he would try to become." I didn't feel happy because Sierra was hurting. I felt relieved because, finally, someone besides me understood the real problem. The problem I had tried to explain, tried to reason through, tried to communicate in every possible way. Yet Sierra refused to hear at the time. One evening, I was cleaning my closet and found the small box where I had kept everything from our relationship: ticket stubs, little notes, photos from our cabin trip. I sat down on the floor, placed the box in front of me, and waited to see what I felt. But I didn't feel pain, or regret, or anger, or affection, just a calm, muted neutrality. The kind that comes from finally stepping out of a maze without dragging any part of it with you. I closed the box, took it downstairs, dropped it into the trash bin, and walked away without looking back. No symbolic goodbye, no dramatic moment, just a quiet period at the end of a sentence. And for the first time in a very long time, I truly felt free. Not free from Sierra, but free from the version of myself I had lost when I tried to become someone in her unfinished story. In the end, I realized something simple but painfully expensive: you cannot love someone who expects you to be the replica of a memory they refuse to release. And walking away wasn't a failure. It was the only way to exist without becoming the shadow of another man. Something made me go to our bedroom. I opened his drawer, the one I hadn't touched in weeks, and rummaged until my fingers brushed against something cold, a tiny silver key taped beneath his watch case. I stared at it for a long time, wondering how many nights he'd walked past me with this secret sitting inches from his hands. I didn't tell Ivy where I was going. She was still sleeping or pretending to. Either way, she wasn't ready for another truth, and I wasn't ready to watch her break again. So I drove alone. The banker recognized Ethan's name immediately. He visited often, the man said casually. Always alone, always. That word hit with the force of a fist. How many times had Ethan come here while I believed he was working late, sitting in his car, decompressing, doing anything but hiding a second life? In the small room where they handed me the metal box, my hands shook as I pulled it out. Inside were 3 more USBs, a thick stack of documents, and a sealed envelope with my name written on the front. To Claire, my throat tightened. For a moment, I thought I wouldn't be able to open it, but I forced myself to. Because if Ethan had wanted to hide forever, he wouldn't have left this behind. His handwriting was steady, familiar, and with each sentence, the world I had built with him shifted, cracked, realigned into something I didn't know how to recognize. He admitted everything. The night with Nora, a mistake I never understood how to undo. The panic he felt when she told him she was pregnant. The guilt that grew, year after year, each time he looked at Ivy and wondered how to tell her she had a brother. The fear of losing our family, of losing me, of breaking the world we had built. I wasn't brave, he wrote. I chose the coward's way, loving two children into different worlds while pretending I could keep them apart. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there in the sterile little room with the hum of fluorescent lights above me, reading a letter from a man who loved me, lied to me, protected me, and betrayed me all at once. When I finally walked outside, the winter air felt sharper, cleaner, and without really thinking, I drove to Nora's apartment. I didn't rehearse anything, didn't know what I would say. I just knew that letting silence grow wasn't saving anyone, least of all Ivy. If anything, the silence Ethan left behind was choking all of us. Nora answered the door with that same startled softness in her eyes. Claire, she whispered. I nodded. We need to talk. Inside, her apartment was small but warm, smelling faintly of cinnamon and citronella. Jamie sat on the floor building a Lego tower, humming to himself. When I looked at him, I saw the innocence of a child who had no idea what kind of fault line he was born into. Nora handed me a cup of tea. Though her hands trembled slightly as she set it down. I never meant to ruin your family, she said. Her voice cracked, but she kept speaking. What happened between me and Ethan was wrong. I know that. I never asked him for anything more than what he offered. I held her gaze. For the first time, I didn't see a threat. I didn't see an enemy. I saw a woman who had been carrying her own share of guilt for years. I'm not here to blame you, I said quietly. I'm here to understand. Those words seemed to unhook something in her. She exhaled a long, tired breath and nodded. She told me everything. How Ethan helped with Jamie's medical bills. How he visited occasionally but always kept his distance, as if punishing himself. How he talked about Ivy with guilt and love braided together in ways Nora couldn't untangle. He loved you, Nora said, crying now. That's the part he never doubted. And maybe that's why he couldn't tell you. I didn't respond at first. The silence between us wasn't sharp like before. Now it felt like a space to breathe, to let truth settle without tearing anything down. The bedroom door creaked open, and Jamie peeked out. Mom, Nora pulled him close, whispering something to him. He nodded and tucked himself quietly at her side. I watched them, this small, fragile family Ethan had built in the shadows. A family that didn't ask to exist but did. When I stood to leave, Nora followed me to the door. Thank you for hearing me out, she whispered. I don't hate you, I said. And I don't hate him. I realized it was true the moment I said it. Hatred would have been easier, but hatred doesn't heal anything. Truth does, even when it cuts. When I got home, I placed the safe deposit key, the documents, and Ethan's letter in a neat pile on the dining table. Ivy, I said softly. Whenever you're ready, it's here. I didn't force her. I didn't beg. I just let the truth sit there waiting for her the way it had waited for me. Late that night, I heard her door open. Soft footsteps, papers rustling, a slow, shaky inhale, then silence, a new silence. Not the kind filled with anger or blame. The kind filled with someone really trying to understand the world again. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, knowing this was only the beginning. But for the first time since Ethan died, the path forward didn't feel completely dark. The next morning, the kitchen felt colder than usual. But Ivy was already sitting at the table when I came downstairs. Her eyes were swollen and red, but calmer. She didn't look at me immediately. She just held her mug like she was grounding herself with its warmth. I read it, she said quietly. I hate what Dad did. I hate how he lied, but I don't hate you. Those words hit harder than any accusation ever could. I didn't reach out or overwhelm her with affection. I simply sat beside her, leaving space for her grief. You don't have to forgive him, I said softly. Not now, not ever. But what he did wasn't because you weren't enough. She swallowed hard. Why do we have to deal with this? Why do we have to carry it? I breathed in slowly. Because the people who created the wounds aren't always here to clean them up. So we decide whether we let the wound define us, or whether we move forward anyway. She didn't respond, but she nodded slowly, painfully, meaningfully. 2 days later, Nora texted me, Jamie has a science presentation today. If you'd like to come. I think Ethan would have wanted that. I stared at the message longer than I expected. I didn't feel anger toward her anymore, just an unfamiliar heaviness I couldn't name. Ivy read the message over my shoulder. Do you want to go? she asked. I don't know, I admitted. She hesitated, then said quietly, I think we should, and so we went. The elementary school was small and warm, filled with children's chatter and the smell of cut paper and glue. Nora stood at the back, nervous but hopeful when she saw us. Jamie was beside a cardboard volcano model, excited and fidgety. When he saw us, he waved enthusiastically. He had no idea what histories were colliding in that little classroom. He just looked happy we were there. Ivy watched him carefully. At first her expression was guarded, but as Jamie began explaining magma chambers and eruption pressure with bright, earnest eyes, Ivy's posture softened. Not a lot, just enough to show she was listening, not turning away from him. After the presentation, Jamie approached us shyly. Miss Claire, I'm glad you came. His voice was small but sincere. Ivy answered before I could. Your project was good, she said. Jamie's whole face lit up. Thank you, he whispered as if she'd given him a treasure. Watching them made something shift in me, not forgiveness, not forgetting, just a quiet recognition that healing sometimes starts in the smallest, most ordinary moments. That night, Ivy came to my room and said, I don't want the last thing I learn about Dad to be hate. I placed a hand on her shoulder. We don't choose what he did, but we choose who we become because of it. She nodded, then murmured, if Jamie wants, he can come over sometime. The relief was almost physical, like a weight sliding off my chest after months. The weeks that followed were slow but gentle. Jamie visited often. He and Ivy argued about science facts, burst into laughter over failed experiments, and started to build something that almost resembled siblinghood. Nora came by too, always cautious, always waiting for permission before stepping further into our home. Sometimes I caught her watching Ivy with a mixture of guilt and gratitude, as if she was afraid to breathe too loudly and disrupt whatever fragile balance was forming. And gradually, a strange harmony settled in, a life neither of us asked for but somehow found a way to accept. I didn't forgive Ethan, I don't know if I ever will, but I stopped letting the anger define him entirely. He made a devastating mistake, one that fractured all of us, but he also left behind pieces worth holding onto. Ivy's courage, Jamie's innocence, and a complicated truth that forced us to grow in ways none of us expected. One evening, Ivy stood beside me by the window, watching Jamie run around the yard with Nora. I think Dad would have wanted this, she said softly. Maybe, I murmured. And as I stood there with my daughter, watching two families awkwardly but earnestly becoming something new, I realized the ending wasn't about forgiveness. It was about choosing not to let betrayal write the rest of our lives. And for the first time since Ethan died, the choice felt possible.